thank you all for having me. This is a tremendous crowd here to see everybody. As you can tell, I don't bring a lot of diversity to the stage, but I do bring accent diversity. So yes, the one accent that doesn't sound like all the others here, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, where we actually last night got almost as much snow as what I saw out here this morning when I came out. And just interestingly enough, I was really being egged on by all my Minnesota friends and colleagues here when going to dinner. I have a rental car. I'm just here across the street. And they're like, oh, this is not much snow. You're going to be fine. You can drive in this. I'm like, okay, macho, I can do this. I got down around this corner here going about 10 miles an hour and started skidding going 10 miles an hour. So I turned into what looks like a abandoned TGI Fridays, and clearly there must be economic problems in this country if a TGI Fridays can't stay open here in Bloomington. And then just scooted myself back and called an Uber. I said, I need the professionals to get me to dinner, which everything was fine then. So I'm really not sure how I'm going to get my car back to the airport on Saturday if this continues. So. I'm here to tell you some things that you already know and that have already been touched on. I'm here to talk to you a little bit more about things that you may not be aware of, and then bring it back home here to Minnesota about the role that this state has played nationally and will continue and should continue to play here on conservation. So you know it, we've talked about it here. You've had a tremendous victory in November in a very divisive, difficult time across the country. Minnesota shined through and was very clear about where they're at. And so as the commissioner, and thank you, Commissioner, for inviting me here today to speak, and as the Lieutenant Governor spoke, and by the way, I really wanted to ask the Lieutenant Governor before she left if she could ask the Department of Transportation to reopen the plow naming contest, because I have an idea. I wanted to add a name to the plows, but I guess I'll have to come back and for next year and get that in there. Well, based on my experience, I don't know if you're familiar with the band Southern Culture on the Skids. I was just going to go with Southerner on the Skids. So I try that for the plows next year. Anyone can do that. I don't know if there's an award or a prize you get, so if you want to throw that in there. But just going over this, looking at the number of people in this room, hopefully everyone did vote for it, but 130 groups coming together, coalition working together, and really want to give a shout out to my friend Paul Austin, who's here in the back, who I've worked with for a long time in Conservation Minnesota. Marcus Starr was really, they were the campaign managers, and it's dangerous always to name somebody when you have 130 groups, but I want to commend Conservation Minnesota and their leadership. Everyone played a role in this. So it couldn't be done by Conservation Minnesota alone. It couldn't be done by any of us alone. We have to come together as a coalition and get these things done. We talked about how many people voted yes. That was great statistics here that I didn't even know, just digging further into Minnesota history, that more people voted for this than any other constitutional amendment in the history of the state of Minnesota. The overwhelming support in passing all 87 counties. So we have a heat map here showing how well this did across the state. Nothing, no lower than 52% in the counties. So, some people talk about that they have a mandate. This is a mandate, guys. This is a mandate. This is what's telling you what's really the opportunity here in Minnesota. So again, I commend you all and applaud you for your efforts. But want to take it into the context here, this legacy that you have in Minnesota and how united you have been despite very difficult political times across the country. And we know that this is what it does here for this the state. The investment in outdoor industry, the Lieutenant Governor's numbers were higher than what I was able to find, so I'm sure she has a lot better numbers than what we were able to find, so that's great. The higher the better. This is a huge economic opportunity, the jobs created. It's more than just the opportunity to be out in nature. It's very important, but it is the economic lifeblood of this state. For those of us like me who are not from Minnesota, I think of Minnesota as the land of 10,000 lakes. I think of it as an outdoor mecca. I think about the boundary waters. I think about fishing and the diversity that you have here. So that you can capitalize on. It creates jobs. It's part of the value system and the identity in Minnesota that you should be proud of, and that people are looking to you more than you realize across the country for leadership. And so this is the context. You are part of class of 2024. Minnesota is not alone in the victory at the ballot for conservation. You can see this map across the country. We had 15 ballot measures since August of last year, and including in November, that we were involved in with our team. And these are the results. Every one of them passed, which is tremendous in this very difficult political time, that people were very clear that they were on board. In fact, if it wasn't for that undervote rule that we have in Minnesota, we would have over 67% support across the country for this. So that undervote brought us down just a little bit, like 66.5% or 4%. I couldn't even round it up. So we have this tremendous help and tremendous legacy here. I'll talk about a few of these ballot measures that have been successful, and the connection back. It's devastating what's happening in California right now. This is just tremendous and terrible to see. This is something that is now an everyday occurrence, and something that is at the height of consciousness for people, particularly in the West. While there's wildfires all over the country, we're seeing it more and more in the West due to the effects of climate change, due to the effects of many different issues. California, recognizing this, voted for a $10 billion bond, a climate resiliency bond, which has $1.5 billion for wildfire. Unfortunately, that just passed in November. They needed the help now. They needed the help going forward. In fact, usually on issues like drought, when we do a lot of polling on our team, if we poll about drought, if it rained the day before and a pollster asked them, oh, there's no issue with drought. Wildfire was like that 10, 15 years ago. Now, because of the prevalence of wildfire, the way that it is out of season and happening so terribly, and people are being so affected by it, the consciousness of wildfire is consistent. It does not go away and not go down. So the people of California invest in themselves and help is on the way to find more ways to address wildfire resilience, among other climate issues. In Washington, again, climate change, they passed, they had multiple ballot measures that failed over the years. So I'll talk a little bit more about our history. We haven't seen a lot that we've failed that we've been engaged in. We've had multiple that failed. A coalition, just like what we saw in Minnesota, a diverse coalition came together, stuck together after that ballot measure failed in 2018, and worked through the governor, through the legislature, and passed the Climate Commitment Act. Well, then some folks who didn't like it wanted to roll it back and put a ballot measure on the ballot in November to undo that Climate Commitment Act. The people of Washington said, no, this is the right thing that we're doing. We're seeing the benefits of it. In fact, we did an economic study. Martha Rogers here with our team helped guide that, that showed that $28 billion will be invested in Washington if they keep those policies in place. So policies like these matter. They change lives. They change the trajectory of where we're going in. And Washington State has committed to that. In fact, the people who voted no, which we're rarely on the no side of a ballot measure, the people who voted no voted at a greater amount than the people that we wanted to vote yes in 2018. So we're moving in the right direction here, and we kept these things in place. I'll move back to the other side of the country, Suffolk County, New York. That's Long Island, looking at the Long Island Sound, trying to protect that area. $6 billion for improving septic tanks and clean water. And so you can see this map here. Overall, nearly $19 billion for conservation past this election cycle. So, You're asking probably at this point, now that you've had to endure my Southern accent for this long, like, why did the commissioner invite this guy from Alabama to come here to tell us about things we already knew and maybe a few things you didn't? The legacy in Minnesota is part of a national legacy, and it comes back to Minnesota. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. Our team, our legacy, and what we've been able to do at the conservation campaigns at the Nature Conservancy. And many of you may know our great staff here at the Nature Conservancy in Minnesota, science-based staff that really get things done on the ground and working with so many of you. We have a deep bench at the Nature Conservancy, and our team is more of the internal political consultants of the Nature Conservancy, where we do a lot of polling, we do a lot of economic research, we work on coalition building. We've done this for over 35 years, and this is our scoreboard. This is our legacy of what we've been able to do with you, people like you, coalitions, and state chapters across the country. Oh, it's really nearly 95% win rate, $139 billion for conservation in 31 states. This is the legacy here, and why have we been able to do that? Exactly why we've been able to see this in Minnesota is we're tapping into people's values. We're researching and understanding where people care about these issues. When you take away the noise, you take away the political infighting and all the different things that we're seeing, and you really focus on the issue at hand, the question that you have of where do you want to be in the future? What do you want for your children? As the Lieutenant Governor talked about her daughter. What is important to you about drinking water, protecting drinking water? Once you localize that and say, here's a program that can help address those issues and so many others, people overwhelmingly say yes because they believe in it, they see themselves in it, they see the benefit, they see the economic benefit. So doing that process in a very systematic way across the country, we're able to see success. And where this comes back to Minnesota, not because you're just part of a class in 2024 and you're in a class in 2010 and a different class of winners for conservation at the ballot box, is our matriarch of the campaigns team here from Minnesota. How many people knew or knew of Carol Bodler? Carol was born here in Minnesota, learned about conservation by being on the farm with her family, got interested in politics, and moved her way up in the Nature Conservancy and throughout Minnesota. She was very involved with the Boundary Waters Canoe Act. She was Tetagooch, there we go. I wrote it out phonetically, and then they're like, no, you wrote it wrong. I'm like, well, this is how I remember. Tetagooch State Park. And then Carol took her expertise to Washington and helped really establish our government relations and policy team at the Nature Conservancy. And from there, she also really developed this process that I just described to you for how we do ballot measures. And took that to Maine, took it to California, back here to Minnesota on the Legacy Amendment. Carol is that leader that we look to, and her legacy is the ballot measures that we do today. Our friend and hers, Steve Alexander, calls her the Johnny Appleseed of conservation funding across the country. That started here in Minnesota. This is where she learned her conservation values, she learned her political chops, and she was able to take it across the country. So your legacy here is more than this phenomenal ballot measure that you passed in November. It's more than the Legacy Amendment that was passed previously and that we'll need to renew again. Your daughter, Carol, brought this to the entire country. And so I did not get to work closely with Carol. I did not know her very well, but I'm here as part of her legacy, and it's very meaningful to me to be back here with you to go, this is where it started for her. So remember that as you celebrate this and you look to implement the trust fund and all the great initiatives that the commissioner talked about and where that funding is going to go. And that is truly Minnesota's legacy, is you have your unique perspective here in Minnesota, that values that you have for conservation, but you have inspired your daughters and sons to go around the country to replicate that in other areas. And so now it's time to come back to Minnesota and think about what's next for us. Because you cannot be a leader, a national leader, and inspire others and then sit on your laurels. You have to look what's next, because there's so much more to be done in this state. There's so much more to be done in this country that we have to do now. We cannot wait. If we wait 10 years, it's going to be gone, or it's going to cost that much more to protect what's left. And so my call to action to you is to think about, where can you go next? What do you need to do? Who do you need to talk to in the legislature to make sure that the programs are funded properly to move things forward? Where do you need to start thinking about the renewal of the legacy amendment? I know that's far in the future, but it's never too early to think about these things and be ready for that. Where can you bring more people along? 77% support is tremendous. But here's what happens. When you don't talk about these programs, you have to reintroduce it to everybody. We must keep this in the public consciousness of people to tap into their values and go, look, we have a program for that. We need to do better on that. We can do more on that. Minnesota's legacy is one of conservation, is one of leadership, and one that must continue and you must reinvest in for the future. So congratulations. I'm very proud of you, and we've applauded you and you've applauded yourselves multiple times for the victory in November. The effort continues. And I'm here to encourage you to be looking towards the future of what can we do next to continue that legacy that Minnesota has that you may not have known about, but I'm here to share with you today how it inspires across the country. So I really appreciate again that you have endured this talk from a Southerner here in snow, which I left snow behind to come see snow. I'm really happy and open to any discussion or questions that you might have based on the presentation or anything else that you're seeing out in the country. Again, thank you for having me, and keep up the good fight for conservation in Minnesota.